We're very excited today to start talking about our forecasting offering. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm one of the founding partners of Fathom, and I've been working very closely with Laura over the last season to build our forecasting offering, and it's very exciting to today begin talking about it publicly and starting to describe some of the things that have been happening over this last season. So it's good to be talking about it.
Absolutely. I'm Laura, Head of Product at Fathom, and as Jeff said, we've been working in forecasting for close to 2 years now, but really in the past maybe 12, 13 months, we've really sort of ramped it up into high gear. Very exciting product to be working on, particularly during the current climate, and in particular something we've become very passionate about along the way as well.
We have to say that, during this year of COVID, to be building something that is so relevant for businesses to understand their position, and to not be sure of what's going to happen in the industry ourselves and in the future, and to be building this product gave a lot of meaning to our team as we were putting our effort into this forecasting product, and built a lot of belief in what we were doing and the importance of it in this day and age when things have been a lot more uncertain. And so it's been a wonderful experience actually building forecasting in 2020 for a world that seems to have a much less predictable future, and to be working hard on solutions that will help businesses understand their futures in uncertain times gives us a lot of energy and passion. So it's been helping us get to work every morning and just to really believe in what we're doing and what we're building as a company. As
you know, we did 7 different phases of customer research. We had some people coming back for different phases as well, and it was great to be able to continue building a relationship with those customers. They were sort of seeing it come to life
through the process.
Stages,
yeah, wow. Yeah.
Which was really cool. I think it was really important when we started off to not really make any assumptions about the type of tool that people were looking for, or the types of tools that people really needed in their workflow. So going into it with completely open eyes and just a curiosity mindset to learn sort of how people currently forecast, why they forecast, the current tooling that they're looking at, the pains, the frustrations that they have with their current process, how long it takes them to be able to forecast, how far out they're usually looking to forecast. That was kicking off the project, a really interesting process, because we really found a lot of surprising things about how businesses work and how important the forecast was for decision making. We were very, very lucky to have so many customers who were thrilled to be asked their opinion and involved in the process. So having that many people sort of re-engaging with us, and then being able to test what we were sort of thinking at different stages, and then what we were eventually building and delivering to market, was able to give us like a huge amount of confidence in our direction, a great sense of what the product that we were building meant for our audience, for our market, and how important certain features were going to be over others.
Can you share some of the common themes that emerged through that, the common shortfalls that they felt in the current climate, and just how that drove our design process from the early stages and setting our North Star goals for this product? Can you share some of those different thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely time intensity was a really common theme. So even before COVID, particularly folks in the advisory community would be sort of spending nine hours on average building a forecast for a client. People working in a business like a CFO or financial controller were spending usually even longer because they had a deeper sort of operational knowledge of the business. And a lot of folks were sort of not able to build forecasts or maintain them in the way that they knew was essential for their business to make decisions because of that time intensity. And then
there's a lot of time to invest building a forecast, isn't it? 9 hours, maybe 1 or 2 business days to get some picture of accuracy.
And the smaller businesses just can't really afford that service either. So a lot of advisors weren't able to offer that.
I remember you telling me too that one of the key findings was that the forecast decays quickly in terms of its relevance, because time goes on, you sort of have this picture of the future, but quickly month 1, month 2, month 3 passes by, and and the relevancy of the forecast that you'd actually spend all that time on declines fairly quickly over time.
Yeah, that was a really common theme. Great for decision making for the first 2 or 3 months, and then month 4 getting shaky, and then businesses would have to start shooting from the hip or invest in sort of a maintenance activity for their forecast, which would again take hours and hours and hours. It wasn't really an efficient process, unfortunately. So that was top of mind for us as well. Another really common theme was, I've built out this great forecast, and how do I get someone to understand what I've done?
It's a huge sheet of Excel numbers or a massive grid of numbers that is hard to decipher, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of like getting that cut through to make sure that that huge document is actually useful, that a business can use it to accurately sort of choose the right pathway, that it supports decision making. You can't sort of just make it and hope. You have to be able to sort of cut through with a clear message of where your business is heading. And so that was definitely for us top of mind, because Fathom's always been such an approachable, such an actionable tool set. We really wanted to make sure that we'd absolutely nailed that down as well.
And the ultimate consumer, of course, is the business decision maker who's trying to plan, the actions that they're going to take in their business in the next 12 months and understand what what they can actually achieve and what they've got cash flow to support. And so aiming it not at the aiming it so that it's approachable for a business owner who may, if they're like me, not be primarily coming from an accounting point of view, makes it understandable, digestible, and so that was one of the key pillars of what we were trying to build, is that approachability.
Yeah, I think if we were to sum up what our goals were, or what our sort of guiding stars were from that early research phase, and amazingly they didn't change throughout the process. So even as we talk to customers more and more, those pillars sort of remained intact the whole way through. It was definitely trying to make something, instead of taking 9 hours, something a little bit more time efficient to create, and more importantly, really easy to maintain.
Staying relevant.
For decision making.
Constantly
because
updating.
If it didn't, we knew that it sort of drift out of usefulness, and it wouldn't be a valuable tool anymore. So something that was adaptive, always sort of relevant for decision making throughout the entire year, rather than just those first few months. Really something that was approachable, was really actionable as well for the business to actually make those decisions with confidence, instead of just sort of saying, here's your forecast, see you later.
Thanks for the numbers.
Thanks for the numbers. Being able to actually change the course of that business is the point of having a tool like that.
We ended up with with clear North Star goals. We believe that every business should have a forecast that is constantly updating and gives them a picture that's relevant. The relevancy is not declining. It's one that's constantly updating as new data's coming in from their financials. We believe that they should be able to plot different futures with scenarios easily, without it becoming a real burden to sort of duplicate things and trying to keep things in sync across multiple areas. We want them to be able to understand exactly where every number comes from if they care, or if they want to be able to sort of dig deep and understand that number. But we also wanted to have a really high picture view where it was so simple to interface with the different events and things that were happening in your business. And to be able to sort of control and strategize and plan, and that's where we really moved across to integrating the concepts of forecasting and planning together. So you're actually planning for significant business events that are happening in your business, and we start talking about these funny things that we've called micro forecasts. Pretty exciting. It is. And when you then step into our business roadmap, and you're creating little mini forecasts, micro forecasts that describe these events in your business, whether they're a marketing campaign, it could be, new staff members with not just the costs involved, but also the income that they're going to generate. So all these things that are financial figures that are tied together, focusing on specific business events, using them as building blocks to sort of be able to move them around and just describe, what happens if I do this? What happens if I push it out a little bit further in time? What happens if I don't hire that person, or don't buy that truck, or don't take out that loan? So being able to easily just interact with your forecast by simply turning off events, these event micro forecasts, is pretty revolutionary. One of the big technical challenges for us was saying, well, let's allow you to interact with the forecast. Let's let you drag it, do events at different times, turn them on and off, but to get the instant feedback of a forecast that's just dynamically giving you instant results, showing you where your cash position is, showing where your profitability is, and to get that quick metrics bar down the bottom, we call it, that shows those figures in real time as you're dragging those bars around and turning them on and off, was an amazing technical challenge. I loved working on that with the engineers and just seeing the excitement that they were building as we worked out how we could really optimize our processing to be able to deliver such a quick, you drag a bar, boom, your figures update, the graph changes, and that sort of live feedback is an incredible technical feat as well from the team. So we've got to congratulate our engineering team for some pretty amazing work that they've done in that area as well.
If you're sort of coaching with a business as an advisor or as an accountant, it's really important to tell them what to focus on. And it sort of goes against the message if you give them 10,000 numbers and you say, here's what you focus on. So instead, to be able to curate that list and set an order for it, we allow you to set thresholds as well. So
that was a cool feature.
Set a little danger zone for where you don't feel comfortable going
so
past.
We're seeing them change from red to green as you're moving these bars around. You can sort of see which metrics have gone below those thresholds where you're comfortable, and you want to be highlighted that's gone below that threshold. So
that's one of the most exciting ones, I think, for communicating the forecast to somebody else, because instead of consuming tens of thousands of numbers, you can just look at the image in front of you, which is, I've got some red spots, some green spots, I've got a few plans happening, in the next few months. What happens if I move those out? Okay, I can smooth out my cash by doing this. There's a lot of visual sort of interactivity in our forecasting tool that is unusual for a forecasting tool, because a lot of them do just generate a lot of numbers. So
and then there was the leap to the trend, putting a trend in there.
And then we ended up with a chart on the bottom as well.
I want to be able to see it. I want to be able to understand, not just look at the grid and try and decipher the numbers, but understand how it's moving as I'm doing a different micro forecast or business events happening at different times. From a software engineering point of view, I just remember making some of the leap thoughts throughout the process, splitting off the micro forecasts. As you drag that bar, all of those figures just moving behind the scenes in the main roadmap, the main forecast grid, realizing that was happening. There was this point where we were talking about what scenarios meant for Fathom. What is a scenario? And we knew that there was an inherent problem with scenarios, because we don't want them to become a completely separate maintained forecast. You don't want to have to sort of split your forecast and say, now I've got another scenario over here. And so we started building this concept of what a scenario was, and there were several leap thoughts I thought that happened during that process. One of them was just going, well, the scenario really talks about something that's happening differently to your main forecast. So let's allow a scenario to essentially inherit everything that's in the main forecast with a small change. And so you could override a timing rule, you could override a value rule, you could override a driver. So maybe my click-through rate's higher in this scenario. You can, just to be able to make simple overrides and changes, but still have everything linked to that main forecast. I mean, that was a leap thought. That meant that scenarios are now just small deltas on your main forecast. Because we'd split off this concept of micro forecasts, to realize that that in the scenario, different business events might happen. So we started saying, well, a scenario might have a different compilation of micro forecasts happening. We might hire that person in the main forecast. We might hire them in the best case scenario, but we might not hire them in the worst case scenario. So we started pulling using the micro forecasts like building blocks, and that was a real leap thought. And I just remember the meeting where you said, in the scenario, it was an obvious, one of those things where it's an obvious statement, but when you realize the significance of it, it's huge. I remember you sitting in the meeting, you saying, in scenarios, these micro forecasts might happen in different times. And to realize that now, in Fathom, yes, you're going to hire a person, but in your worst case scenario, you might not hire them straight away. You just might hire them, a little later. It might take a bit longer. It's the same micro forecast. It's the same set of figures under the hood.
Same building block.
Yeah.
And to be able to use different sets of building blocks to either show exactly the same picture but at different times, or to be able to show a totally different plan. So instead of hiring 3 new people, we're going to hire 1 person, we're going to move offices, we're going to maybe start a new product line or something like that. But to be able to build out each of those as their own self-contained financial model, and then use scenarios to dynamically use collections of those things, is probably what makes our forecasting product so exciting from a scenarios angle, because scenario analysis is not a new thing.
Yeah.
It's just this take on it is a little bit unique and a little bit unusual, I suppose, but very maintainable. Unlike a lot of scenario planning, like through our research process, a lot of scenario planning was sort of one of those things where people said, I know I should do it, but it takes a long time, and it's...
Once you've done it, it's really hard to keep it in sync,
I can't
right?
keep it up to date. Yeah. So normally I can only do it, make one decision with it, and then it's toast, you know. And it's a heavy activity to do that. And early in the process, we were like, I wish there was a way we could solve for that, you know, because that's annoying. The fact that a scenario and scenario analysis is such a good tool for, especially the time we're in now, where you need to look at different pathways quite realistically. You need to see, okay, what happens if my revenue is 10% lower than I think it's going to be? What happens if my costs are a bit higher? What happens if I hire those 3 people? What happens if I hire 1? You know, it's the ability to dynamically look at all those different lenses and get a forecast out of each one that shows you sort of how favorable that future looks is such an important tool for this climate, this level of uncertainty that businesses are facing now. And to be able to provide that without a customer doing too much work, in fact, doing almost no work to produce a scenario in Fathom.
Well, what is it?
Amazing.
It's maybe saying, I'm going to earn 5% more revenue in this scenario, and then maybe my micro forecasts are happening. These business events are just happening at different points in time. So it's as simple as a couple of overriding rules and dragging a few bars, and boom, you've got yourself a different scenario. You can plan, you know, to be able to. It was one of the funny things that you mentioned back when we did the survey. So hundreds and hundreds of survey results coming in, but everyone's saying, I should do scenarios, but I don't.
I don't.
Yeah. So why don't we make it easy for you to do scenarios? You know,
yeah.
and so that keeping the scenario so simple and connected to your main forecast, so that as you do adapt and change your main forecast, all those adaptations are flowing through to the scenario, unless they've been overridden specifically. That was a pretty cool, revolutionary way of making scenarios simple and making them so that they're maintainable.
That's one of the most interesting things about our process, I think, is that we set out to create a forecasting tool. But along the way, we realized that business planning is so integral to how the forecast turns out. And what a lot of businesses were doing was sort of making a plan and then building a forecast based on that plan. And there was a lot of back and forth between the person doing the planning and the person building the forecast. They often weren't the same person. And the best part about how we've approached things, or how we were thinking about things, was that the forecast should inform the plan and vice versa. So by tying the two together, it allows really dynamic, really interactive business planning, but underneath it's creating a full-fledged three-way financial forecast, which I think is the very, very first tool that's been able to do that. And that's why it's so exciting. And for it to facilitate so much flexibility and sort of so much creativity, I think, from the business owner's part to be able to engage in their forecast in a way they haven't been able to before, because we've made it as simple as dragging bars around, and they don't even have to think about the fact that behind the scenes, thousands of figures
you're taking grid management of huge, vast quantities of numbers out of the equation and allowing people to just interact with the specific business events that are happening. That's why planning is now the new forecasting. The other one that emerged is that you could have the best forecasting product in the world, but if you don't describe where the numbers have come from, you can't have confidence in it. And so we wanted, because obviously often it's quite a accounting savvy business owner or CFO from a business, or an accountant or an advisor who's providing forecasts for their businesses. We want them to really believe in the numbers. So the other pillar that we haven't spoken about was really making sure that every single number in the forecast is auditable, explainable, and so confidence can be built in the numbers And then when you zoom out and you see the overall picture sort of stuff, you don't have to sort of worry that the numbers under the hood aren't well supported and well documented. There was the one user that you interviewed who said, you've made the balance sheet a first-class citizen, because you can go to the balance sheet, you can see every movement that's come down from the profit and loss, the timing profiles as they're applying to it, and you can actually see, and audit every single figure right down to the balance sheet. And so they were really pumped that the balance sheet was now a first-class citizen as well. So it's been a great effort to just bring that auditability component in there as well. So one of the challenges, I guess, with that maintainability and that constancy, and this led to one of my North Star goals I was most passionate about, was being able to, as the financial accounting for a month is complete, and it's of course coming into Fathom nightly, and Fathom has this capability to do scheduled reports. So once your bookkeeping's done, out goes the scheduled report for the month. But to actually have the forecast auto update each month to spin from the latest sets of financials and show you the future now that you've got this latest accounting data automatically was one of the North Star goals, and that led to the whole area of realizing that not all the data is always captured in the accounting system. So we've got things like income tax, where it's really done by the accountant sometimes at the end of the close of the financial year, and we realized we had to automate some things like automatically adjusting for your income tax liability, so that if that's automatically, we use the formulas you've created when you've set up your taxes in forecasting, but to do it so that we can automatically adjust your actuals to say, well, based on these forecasts, I want Fathom, yes please, to automatically create adjustments for my tax position, so that every month I can get a report that's got a good opening position, and with even with no touch, no hands-on, you're going to get an updated forecast spinning from a new date with a new opening position, and of course that's the point that you can go in there and say, well, actually, I didn't hire that person that I was planning to hire this month. Let's just drag that micro forecast out a bit, and so that maintainability is automated as much as possible. And the only human interactions you really need is to kind of say, well, my plan's changed slightly, so I go in and tweak my plan. That flow of automatically accounting data coming in, a schedule report going out with a new adjusted opening position, forecasting my future from this latest set of financials, that was pretty cool to achieve.
And part of the philosophy, I guess, for us is that the best forecast is
the one that's
data. Yeah, the one that's using the latest information to infer the future. And it seemed really unusual to us that there was this whole culture behind letting it go a little bit stale before investing the time in making it up to date again. And
one of the craziest things, and the result of all of this, is that when you go through our forecasting product, you can't find a spin forecast button. There is none. You make a change, and the main forecasts and the scenarios are automatically updated. They'll update right in front of your eyes. Whatever lens you're looking through, when you go into our product, the design team have done a fantastic job, but just to have that scenario chooser in the top right, and you can look through the lens of any scenario, and you make a change, and you're just seeing instant feedback with no need to sort of make a few changes, then go somewhere else, hit spin, go somewhere else, download a report. The whole thing's integrated, so you're getting the information in real time as you're making these changes. That was a pretty cool accomplishment. I was very proud of that with the team and the effort that they put into that.
That's a great one as well, because there's so many version control issues with Excel forecasts, for instance. Like, am I looking at the right document? Am I looking at the right forecast? But in Fathom, of course, this is it. There's
one source of truth. It's the same model used to spin with different scenarios and your main forecast, and we know that it's the source of truth. We've interviewed lots of people, and we've put North Stars up in front of us that work together. And if we go back over those pillars that you started with, it is time efficient to create. It doesn't take 9 hours. Yeah. It is that fast. It is constantly easy to maintain. It doesn't degrade, and it isn't a complex job to come in and try and reforecast, respin forecasts all the time. So we've solved that problem. We've made it approachable. So we've got the roadmap Just those simple interactions about moving bars, turning things on and off, dealing with your forecast at a very high level. Scenarios, it's a very simple but hugely powerful concept to just have things happening at different times and just a few simple overrides in that. So being able to do those in a way that's quite easy to do and it's approachable for business owners, but also goes deep for the accountants and advisors who really care. And of course, being fully transparent and auditable and making that, making that open for making our methodologies open so that people can verify that the number that we gave them for cash actually has a lot of reasons behind it, and you can actually follow the whole train to understand where it's come from. So we've stuck through to those. We've stuck true to those North Star goals, and of course my personal one of making sure that you can generate a report that has an updated forecast automatically in any given month with no touch, and have your accounting system data come through, have Fathom automatically update your opening positions, and then generating a report that's based off the new accounting data. That for me was just a massive integration North Star goal that we had in it. So we've really landed on a system that is deeply integrated. Yep. It ties together with Fathom as you see it today. It's great that we've made it so that it is included in your Fathom offering. So that's exciting for us to not charge people extra for it, but to say, well, you've got the benefits of reporting today and the analysis tools. They're world class, but now you get forecasting on top of that included in your monthly plan. So for us, we believe every business should have a forecast, and we don't really want to encourage people not to do it. Well, thank you, Laura. It's been a fantastic thing to reminisce on the whole process, really, of building forecasting, and we're very proud of what we've built. We have a high level of belief in how it's going to help businesses, and so wasn't it a fun thing to sit back and reflect and
talk about the journey again?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some very, very good memories. So if you'd like to find out more about our forecasting offering, please, you can go to our website. There's plenty of information there. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Happy forecasting.
Happy forecasting.